Hello, welcome to Tarot and Attachments. My name is Erin Smith, and I am a professional tarot reader and an associate marriage and family therapist. So I'm on here today because we will be having a new moon in the sign of Libra this coming Tuesday, October 21st. And I thought it would be a good time to check in with the cards and ask for some insight or guidance around what may be coming up for us in the week ahead and how we might navigate these energies in a skillful way. So I'm going to do my thing. I'm going to go silent. I'm going to concentrate while I shuffle, and I'll be with you momentarily. I'm just going to say a prayer over these cards. Ooh, yeah, okay. Well, definitely some volatile energies that are showing up here in this poll. And, you know, what I'm seeing here is that circumstances that are happening out in the world that are tied to wanting to maintain control through deception, through dominance, through suppression, that we are having a radical shift in perspective that is generally affecting everyone. We are seeing things more clearly. Thus, we are able to take more skillful action in the face of this intense collapse, this restructuring of societal institutions, of power in particular, that are collapsing under their own weight, that the instability can no longer be carried forward, that people are breaking the chains of suppression because they are seeing things in a different light. So, Tower is major upheaval, big changes that affect us in core ways. And these changes usually show up in terms of, I mean, you can think of this, if we're thinking about this archetypally, it's sort of like the energy of Saturn builds structures over time. And the benefits of Saturn are a kind of stability. We are expected to build our character as a result of meeting with challenges, extended challenges. And the way that we respond, the structures that we build as a result, the energy that we invest in order to meet those challenges, it can create a kind of stability. Saturnian energy is often connected with the sage, one who has experience in terms of navigating life. But there is such a thing too as structures that once provided safety and security becoming staid. They're stagnant. They no longer serve that purpose of creating stability. And oftentimes, these structures have a tendency to become corrupted. So the shadow side of Saturn is Father Time who eats his children. He devours them. This need to uphold power at all costs, regardless of the harm that it causes. Uh, you can actually see the sign of Saturn emblazoned on the hand of the devil. And so, this idea that these structures that we built over time, political parties, branches of government, that while at one time these structures provided some kind of stability, they have become infiltrated by those who wish to hoard power at the top, and that it can no longer bear the weight of this. And so these structures are crumbling. And this can be a very discombobulating time. I often associate the tower with Kali, Kali being the goddess of creation and destruction. And in order to create something new, it is often necessary to tear down the old structures and clear away the detritus. So there's actually room for something new to come in, which, in light of this energy, the devil is really about needing to implement systems of control that enslave those who are caught up in it. And I'm even going to suggest that certainly, okay, let's just put it within the context of a capitalist system, that, those who benefit from the labor of the masses that are amassing wealth through the labor of others who are essentially being turned into wage slaves, right? If the capitalists are hoarding the wealth at the top, it is easy to see how the laborers are being disempowered, how they are certainly not benefiting from the fruits of their own labor. But I'm even going to suggest that those who hoard wealth are also ensuring their own demise. That ultimately what happens is that you push people far enough and they revolt, they push back. There is a breaking point at which people say, no more. I am going to push against the chains that would enslave me, or break those chains. And look, you can see in the imagery of this card the power of this, that the chains are actually quite loose. Once you see that these structures are a kind of mental construct, once we understand that we have options, that we don't have to do things the way that they've always been done, particularly when they stop working, then we are freed to find our own power, to take our power back, is essentially what we're being asked to do, and allow these structures to fall. So here we have Hanged Man. Hanged Man is actually Odin. He is the Norse god of wisdom, and he hangs himself from the tree of life in order to become enlightened. And so if you think about this, what we're being asked to do is take a different view. That it is easy to take for granted that the things that are familiar, the societal structures that we believe to be, it's just the way that it is, because that's the way it's always been. Once we take a step back and we examine it from this opposite perspective, again, nothing will allow you to see the world in a different way, quite like hanging upside down. If we take it for granted that this is just the way the world is, to radically change our view, suddenly we start to see that there are other possibilities, that things look very different when we choose to view them from a different perspective. And that this opens up the possibility. So, if not this, then what? And of course, that requires a kind of visioning. And certainly historians have talked a lot about this, that it is not enough to tear down systems of tyranny. You actually have to replace them with something different. Because oftentimes what happens is that when you topple a regime, an equally corrupt regime comes in to take its place. And so it is ever so important for us to imagine systems that serve everyone. And so that's very much what's being represented here in the Ten of Pentacles. Pentacles are sort of literally pointing to material wealth and well-being. And, again, if we're thinking in terms of capitalism, money, wealth is certainly something that we've orchestrated our societal structures around. But what I love about this image is that there's this abundance of material resources that seem to be benefiting everyone in society, the old and the young alike. Even the animals, right? The children, nature, everyone is flourishing under this visioning of a new way. So, today I'm recording this on Saturday. Today is No King's Day. I'm recording this between client sessions. And interestingly enough, we have these kings here coming up. And so we tend to think, certainly in this day and age, of kings as being tyrants who rule with an iron fist. Again, indicative of this corruption where they are not thinking about how their actions to govern are negatively impacting the general populace. It is a self-centered kind of rule. And yet, one of the archetypal representations of kings within the tarot is about sovereignty. And in this case, you might even think in terms of self-sovereignty. How is it that we, each of us individually in society, can take our power back in order to assume the throne in our own lives? So instead of giving up our power to corrupt people and institutions, we become self-governing together, collectively, with the objective of of building a society that takes care of all of its members. What might we have to do in order to step into this vision in life? And so remember, swords are the suit of thoughts, ideas, communication. And the way that I think about the King of Swords, he is one who has learned to wield his sword wisely. And what that means is that he does not use his thoughts or words as a weapon on himself or others. He only uses his thoughts and words for the betterment of himself or others. He uses his sharp mind in order to cut away the extemporaneous and see the truth, speak the truth, rather than being manipulative or self-critical or overly judgmental. He is able to practice discernment with his thoughts in order to be wise in the way that he is governing. And similarly, you can think of the King of Pentacles as someone who is deeply embodied in the way that they govern their lives, that they are taking right action to care for themselves and the world that they live in. This idea that somehow money is divorced from the environment that we live in, that if we're producing wealth in a way that undermines the health of our ecosystem, that somehow that isn't going to come back to bite us in the ass. I mean, you cannot destroy the earth and have money mean anything within that context. In order to live richly, we have to ensure the health and well-being of our bodies, our planet, our water systems, our air. And of course, that equally affects everyone. So I think this is a really interesting card to come up. I think what we're seeing out there in our ecosystem, two of these cards, these are cards that I write about in my thesis. I mean, I started this channel initially to talk about uh, elements of my thesis, which, I mean, for those of you who don't know me, I got my master's degree in counseling psychology from Pacifica Graduate Institute, which is primarily a Jungian approach to psychology. And so this sort of psychodynamic way of looking at people's psychology, which simply means that we recognize that that which lies below the level of consciousness, that which resides within our unconscious, dramatically affects the way that we move through the world, the choices that we make, the types of relationship dynamics that we experience. The narratives that we construct are primarily they have everything to do with what lies beneath the surface of consciousness. And these two cards, basically in my thesis, I'm proposing that there are cards within the tarot that have reliably over the years come up in my readings for clients, indicating that there's some kind of attachment wounding in the person's history. And I won't go into the specifics about attachment theory because it's a long discussion. And if you're interested, I can make a separate video on that at some point where I go into this more in detail. But the basic principle is that we develop an attachment strategy around the age of 1. It is a time in our development where we are operating entirely out of the unconscious. We're pre-verbal. We have not learned to speak and we don't think symbolically yet. We don't have a separate sense of self. We are feeling our way into the world. And so what is happening to us at that stage of our development? The environment that we're born into, which means whatever our parents are experiencing, whatever strife or struggle they're experiencing in their own lives or within their own relationship, we are absorbing emotionally as infants. So the care that we receive or don't receive at that time in our life dramatically affects this unconscious feeling that we have about ourselves and the world at large. And when our needs are not met in a good enough way, we develop a sense of insecurity. The world is unstable. I am not good enough to get my needs met. And it affects our relationships, the type of people that we're attracted to, again, the relationship dynamics that we find ourselves in over and over again, the type of work that we pursue, whether or not we feel capable of providing for ourselves financially, all these things are affected. And these two cards represent attachment wounds. And specifically, the devil I associate with attachment trauma, abuse, severe neglect, substance use issues that enslave us. And the moon is about things we keep hidden from ourselves, things that are too painful or too uncomfortable to look at in the light of day. And so it gets buried in the unconscious. It is parts of ourselves that have been exiled because we don't have the ego strength to acknowledge them. And so that which lies beneath the surface, again, it comes out in terms of the way that we feel and the things that we do. And the moon is really an invitation for deep healing, but only if you have the courage and the strength to look beneath the surface and ask ourselves, why? Why do I find myself in these relationships with others that are represent power iniquity? And how can I offer myself comfort and soothing and acknowledgement, this openness, this curiosity, this lack of judgment, to look within and see these wounded parts of myself, and instead of, banishing them into the underworld with anger and resentment, how can I open up to them with kindness and compassion and understanding? And find ways to soothe these wounded parts in order to bring them back into a whole state of being. So the moon is really about bringing this unconscious material up into conscious awareness to be healed, so that again, we can see things from a new perspective, and truly from multiple perspectives, to get out of this sort of binary existence. I am either good or bad. I am either lovable or loathable, right? That this idea that there is complexity. And if I'm able to hold the tension of that complexity, then I'm able to take skillful action. The Knight of Swords is like the time to talk about it is over. It's time to do something in related to right view, seeing things clearly and doing what needs to be done in order to right the ship, in order to so that all might be benefited instead of a select few that would sacrifice all of our well-being in order to hold on to this power, which is ultimately going to be their undoing. It's an interesting time. It's an interesting time. And again, the work that we can do is both inner work, but also outer work, joining with others, unifying forces for the good of all living beings so that we can all prosper. This is the vision, and holding that vision will help to orient ourselves rightly when these societal structures collapse. So, I don't know. I hope that this message was helpful. I hope that it can anchor you in a sense of hope and well-being, that there are things that can be done in the midst of some pretty intense societal restructuring. And we have a say. We have a say in how we want society to be organized. And so, on that note, I am wishing you many blessings on this new moon. I am holding you in my heart and mind, hoping for all of us to prosper. And please let me know if you want me to make another video going more deeply into the nature of attachment theory and how I believe the tarot relates to that or exemplifies that. All right. My blessings. Take care.